The last thing I remember is the blinding glare of headlights where they really shouldn't have been. Then came the sickening screech of tires, and the world just tumbling end over end, a kaleidoscope of shattered glass and twisted metal. The next thing I knew, I was blinking awake to the sterile, rhythmic beep of a hospital heart monitor. I was expecting to see the worried faces of my mother and brother. Instead, the first person I saw was a lawyer in a crisp suit, holding a leather-bound folder. He didn't offer condolences. He offered a document. It was a court order, signed by my own family, declaring me mentally incompetent. They'd used my brush with death not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. While I was lying there, broken and unconscious, they seized control of the billion-dollar empire I had bled for, the company I'd built from my father's small workshop into a titan of industry. They left me for dead with nothing. But they made one fatal, unforgivable mistake. They left me. And in the silence of that hospital room, with the ghost of betrayal sitting heavy on my chest, a new purpose began to beat right in time with that monitor. Revenge. If you enjoy a good story about getting back what's yours, go ahead and like this video and subscribe for more. It's a great way to let the algorithm know you want to see justice served. Now, let's get into the story. It's funny, isn't it? How the brightest memories can cast the darkest shadows. Our family business, Sterling Innovations, wasn't always some cold, corporate behemoth. It started in my father's garage. I remember being 10 years old, holding a flashlight for him while he tinkered with prototypes, the smell of solder and hot metal just hanging in the air. He was a brilliant engineer, a true visionary who saw the future in circuits and code. My brother, Marcus, was 2 years older. He was the charming one, the salesman in training, even back then. He could sell ice in a blizzard, my father used to say with a proud laugh. I was the quiet one, the builder. I got my father's hands, his patience, his obsession with making things work and making them work perfectly. When our father passed away unexpectedly, I was 22, just out of engineering school. Marcus was finishing his MBA. The company was respectable, a mid-sized firm with a handful of patents and a solid reputation. But it was stagnant. My mother, a woman who prized social standing above absolutely everything else, saw the company as a means to an end, a way to fund her galas and keep the family name polished. Marcus saw it as his birthright, a platform for his ambition. I think I was the only one who saw it as our father's soul. In the years that followed, Marcus became the face of Sterling Innovations. He was the one on the magazine covers, giving the speeches, shaking all the hands. He wore the expensive suits and drove the fast cars. I was in the labs, in the factories, on the server farms. I was the one pulling 18-hour days, sleeping on a cot in my office during product launches. I was the one who personally redesigned our entire manufacturing process, cutting waste by 40%. I was the one who led the R&D team that developed the Helios chip, the revolutionary piece of tech that put us on the map and sent our valuation into the stratosphere. Marcus handled the board and the investors. I handled the actual business. He was the thunder, and I was the lightning that did all the work. Our mother adored it. Her 2 perfect children ruling a kingdom. She'd pat my hand at family dinners and say, "It's wonderful that you enjoy the technical side of things, dear. It leaves Marcus free for the important work." Important work. To her, that meant networking at the country club, not debugging code at 3 a.m. to prevent a multi-million-dollar shipping delay. I never fought it. I didn't care about the spotlight. I cared about the legacy. I loved the challenge, the puzzle of it all. I believed we were a team, a family. I'd see Marcus close a massive deal and feel a surge of pride. That deal was only possible because of the products I designed, the efficiency I implemented. He'd clap me on the back and say, "We did it, little sis. You keep building them, I'll keep selling them." It felt like a perfect partnership. Looking back, the signs were all there, like hairline fractures in a foundation. The way Marcus would present my technical reports to the board as if they were his own analysis. The way my mother would gently steer conversations away from my contributions, focusing instead on some society gala Marcus had charmed. There was the time I proposed a new employee profit-sharing program, a way to give back to the people who were the lifeblood of the company. My mother dismissed it as unseemly, and Marcus said it would unsettle the investors. It was quietly shelved. Their vision for the company was just different from mine. I wanted to build a sustainable legacy. They wanted to build a personal ATM. The last big project before the accident was our expansion into clean energy. It was my passion project, a way to pivot the company towards the future, to make it something more than just profitable. It was a massive undertaking, and it required a huge capital investment. Marcus was hesitant. "The risk is too high," he argued. "Our shareholders prefer guaranteed returns." My mother sided with him, as she always did, but I was relentless. I had the data, the projections, the prototypes. I spent 6 months building an ironclad case. Finally, I went over their heads, directly to a consortium of our most forward-thinking investors. I secured the funding myself. It was a victory, but a hollow one. The look on my brother's face wasn't pride. It was a cold, appraising stare I'd never seen before. My mother stopped speaking to me for a week. I had shown them that I didn't just build the products. I could build the entire future of the company, with or without them. I had proven I wasn't just the quiet engineer in the background. I was a threat. The week after the funding was finalized, I was driving home late from the lab when those headlights swerved into my lane. The first few days in the hospital were a blur of pain, confusion, and heavy sedatives. I had a severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, a long road to recovery ahead of me. When the fog finally started to lift, I kept asking for my mother and Marcus. The nurses were evasive, just offering gentle smiles and platitudes. "They've been informed," they'd say. "You just focus on resting." But they never came, not once. Instead, on the 5th day, Mr. Davenport arrived. He was the family's longtime attorney, a man who drafted my father's will and had known me since I was a kid. He entered my room with a funereal solemnity, his briefcase clicking open with a sound that felt unnervingly final. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't mention the crash. He just placed a sheaf of papers on my bedside table. "As you can imagine," he began, his voice completely devoid of warmth, "the board and the shareholders are very concerned about the stability of Sterling Innovations. Your accident has created a leadership vacuum." I tried to sit up, a sharp pain shooting through my chest. "A vacuum? Marcus is the CEO. I'm the chief technology officer. The teams know what they're doing. I can take calls in a week." He gave me this pitying look. "It's not that simple. The nature of your injuries, particularly the head trauma, has raised questions about your long-term cognitive function. Your mother and brother, acting as majority shareholders and with your best interests at heart, have petitioned the court for an emergency conservatorship." The words didn't register at first. Conservatorship, incompetent, it sounded like something out of a bad movie. "What are you talking about? I'm fine. My mind is fine." The doctor's preliminary reports were ambiguous, he said smoothly, and I knew right then he was lying. "They noted post-traumatic confusion. Your family provided evidence of erratic behavior leading up to the accident." "Erratic behavior?" I choked out, the words tasting like acid. "You mean securing the largest funding deal in the company's history. You mean pushing the company into the future." "They framed it as recklessness," Davenport said, not even looking at me. "Going against the CEO's counsel, taking on undue financial risk, alienating the board. They painted a picture of an unstable visionary who had become a liability." It all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The timing of the crash, their absence, this cold, clinical, legal attack. This wasn't a family worried about my well-being. This was a corporate coup, executed with military precision. The document he'd brought was the court order. It granted my brother, Marcus, full legal authority over my personal, medical, and financial affairs. It stripped me of my position at Sterling, my seat on the board, my shares, my voting rights. Every cent I had ever earned, every piece of the company I had built, was now under his complete control. They had used my broken body as the key to unlock my life and steal it. "They can't do this," I whispered, the rage building under the pain and the drugs. "I'll fight this. I'll get my own lawyer. I'll see them in court." Davenport sighed, a theatrical show of reluctance. "Your assets have been frozen, pending a full competency hearing. Marcus, as your conservator, has determined that hiring legal counsel to fight him would be a frivolous waste of your resources. He has, however, arranged for you to be transferred to a top-tier long-term care facility. The best money can buy." The best prison. A gilded cage where I'd be kept quiet, drugged, and out of the way while they plundered my legacy. They hadn't just stabbed me in the back. They had waited until I was helpless, then twisted the knife with a lawyer and a smile. My own mother, the woman who was supposed to protect me, had signed the papers. She had chosen her ambitious, charming son over the daughter who had actually built their kingdom. As Davenport packed his briefcase and left, the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor seemed to mock me. The sound of a life that had been saved, only to be stolen. Lying there, pinned by my injuries and their treachery, I felt a coldness spread through me that had nothing to do with the hospital AC. It was the death of my old self, the trusting daughter, the loyal sister, the dedicated builder. And in that cold, silent tomb of betrayal, something new and hard began to form. They thought they had buried me. They were about to find out they had only planted a seed. The long-term care facility was exactly what I'd pictured. A beautiful, sun-drenched prison on a sprawling estate, miles from anywhere. The staff called us guests and spoke in these hushed, therapeutic tones. The walls were a calming beige, the furniture was soft, and the windows had locks I couldn't open. My phone was taken away to minimize stress. My internet access was heavily filtered to encourage rest. I was completely and utterly isolated. My days fell into this monotonous rhythm of physical therapy, bland meals, and sessions with a therapist who was so clearly on my family's payroll. She would just nod sympathetically as I raged about the injustice, scribbling notes on her pad. "It's common to feel anger and paranoia after a significant trauma," she'd say, her voice like lukewarm water. "Let's focus on acceptance." Acceptance. They wanted me to accept that I wasn't the architect of a billion-dollar company anymore, but a patient, a ward of the state with better curtains. They wanted me to forget who I was, and for a little while I almost did. The physical pain was immense, a constant, grinding reminder of what had happened. But the psychological torment was infinitely worse. I was trapped. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every conversation, every condescending pat on the hand, every dismissive comment. How had I been so blind? I had poured my entire soul into that company, into that family. I sacrificed my youth, my personal life, my health, all for a shared dream that I was the only one who actually believed in. News from the outside world trickled in. I saw a business magazine in the common room. There was Marcus on the cover, smiling his brilliant, predatory smile. The headline read, "Sterling's New Visionary, How Marcus Sterling Saved His Family's Legacy After Tragedy." The article painted him as a hero. It talked about his sister's tragic breakdown and his courageous decision to step in. They hadn't just stolen my life's work. They'd stolen my story, recasting me as a madwoman and him as the savior. The rage was so profound it left me breathless. My requests for an independent lawyer were denied by Marcus, my conservator, who deemed them medically inadvisable. My letters to old friends went unanswered. I learned later they were intercepted. I was a ghost, haunting the halls of my own life. The lowest point came about 3 months in. My body was healing, but my spirit was shattered. I overheard 2 orderlies talking in the hallway. They were discussing Sterling Innovations' latest quarterly report. "The new CEO is gutting that clean energy division his sister started," one said. "Selling it off for parts, says it was a vanity project." That project had cost me everything. It had been my hope for the future, and they were dismantling it, erasing the last piece of my vision. In that moment, something inside me just broke. The grief and rage collapsed into a vast, empty despair. For a full day, I didn't get out of bed. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I just stared at the wall, feeling the weight of their victory crushing me. They'd won. They had taken everything, and I was nothing. A broken body in a quiet room, with nothing left to lose. And then, as the sun set, a new thought pierced through the fog. Nothing left to lose. It wasn't a cry of despair anymore. It was a statement of fact. I was at rock bottom. There was nowhere to go but up. They had stripped me of my company, my money, my freedom, my reputation. But in doing so, they had given me a strange and terrible gift, liberation. I was no longer bound by loyalty. I wasn't concerned with the family name. I had no one to please, no one to answer to. My old life was ashes. Fine, I would rise from them, and I would become the fire that burned their world to the ground. The despair receded, replaced by a cold, clear, diamond-hard resolve. The patient died that night. The warrior was born. My transformation began quietly. I started playing the part they wanted. I smiled at the nurses. I engaged in therapy, talking about acceptance and moving on. I started taking long walks in the gardens, looking for all the world like a woman coming to terms with her new, quiet life. I became the model patient, compliant, serene, forgettable, and as they started to relax their guard, I started to work. My first breakthrough came from the library. The facility had a small collection of books, but it also had a computer with that filtered internet. It was meant for browsing the news and sending pre-approved emails, but I knew that no filter is perfect. For weeks, I did exactly what they expected. Then, late one afternoon when the supervising nurse was distracted, I started probing the system. I became a tech-savvy ghost in their machine. Using cached pages and loopholes in the filter's code, I managed to get one single, unsecured message out to the one person I thought might listen. The one person my family had wronged almost as much as me. His name was Arthur Vance. He had been my father's CFO and his closest friend. A quiet, brilliant man with an almost religious devotion to balanced ledgers and ethical business. When my father died, Arthur stayed on and acted as my mentor. He taught me how to read a balance sheet and spot the games people play. When Marcus took over as CEO, one of his first moves was to force Arthur into early retirement. Marcus called him old-fashioned and resistant to a more aggressive growth strategy. I knew the real reason. Arthur was incorruptible. He was a roadblock to the kind of company Marcus and my mother wanted. I sent him a simple, cryptic message from a temporary email account. The eagle's nest is empty. The wolves are in the boardroom. They grounded the wrong bird, need a flight plan. Ghost. It was a series of references only he would get. The eagle's nest was what my father called his office. The wolves was his term for corporate raiders, and ghost was my old nickname in the R&D lab. For 2 agonizing weeks, I heard nothing. I started to fear he'd ignored it or it never got through. I kept up my charade of the placid patient, my heart a cold knot of anxiety. Then, on visiting day, an unfamiliar name was on the list. A Mr. Black. I walked into the visitation room, and there he was. Arthur Vance, looking older, grayer, but with the same sharp, intelligent eyes. He didn't hug me or offer empty sympathies. He was all business. He sat down and placed a small, innocuous-looking pen on the table. "It's good to see you on your feet," he said, his voice low. "I was sorry to hear about your accident." "It was no accident, Arthur," I said, my voice just as quiet. He nodded slowly. "I never figured it was. Marcus doesn't have the stomach to arrange something like that, but he's a master opportunist. He sees a car crash, he sees a golden ticket." He pushed the pen slightly toward me. "This is a recording device. It's also a high-capacity encrypted data drive. Tell me everything, don't leave out a single detail." And so I did. For an hour, I spoke in a low, steady monotone, pouring out the whole story of the betrayal, the coup, the isolation. I told him about the clean energy division being dismantled, about the lies in the press. He just listened without interruption, his expression like a stone monument. When I finished, a long silence hung in the air. "They declared you incompetent," he finally said, the words dripping with contempt. "I've seen your work, your designs, your projections. Your mind is a goddamn fortress. The only incompetence in that family is moral." He leaned forward. "I've been watching them since they pushed me out. They're leveraged to the hilt. Marcus is using the company as his personal piggy bank, funding speculative ventures with his country club friends. Your mother is siphoning funds through a fraudulent charity foundation. They're bleeding the company dry and cooking the books to keep the stock price up. They're not just thieves, they're fools, and fools always leave a trail." In that moment, I felt hope for the first time in months. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was one half of a conspiracy. "What do we do?" I asked. A slow, cold smile touched Arthur's lips. "You are going to keep being the perfect, recovering patient. You're going to get yourself declared competent again. It'll be a long, frustrating process, but you'll do it. Play their game. While you do that," he said, tapping the pen, "I am going to become your eyes and ears. I still have friends at the firm. Loyalists. People who respected your father and resent what Marcus has done. We are going to conduct a full forensic audit from the outside." We'll find every doctored invoice, every ghost employee, every illegal transfer. We aren't just going to expose them. We're going to build a case so airtight that by the time we're done, they won't have enough money left for a bus ticket out of town." He stood up to leave. "They left you with nothing," he said, his voice like flint. "It's a powerful position. It means you have nothing to fear. We'll take it all back. Every last cent. Every last shred of their reputation. It's what your father would have wanted." As I watched him go, I held the pen in my hand. It felt heavier than steel. It was my weapon, my key, the beginning of their end. My quiet comeback had just begun. The next year was a masterclass in deception. On the surface, I was the facility's success story. I charmed my therapist with talk of rebuilding my life on a smaller, more manageable scale. I took up watercolor painting. I spoke of wanting to move to a quiet cottage by the sea. I became so bland and unassuming that I was practically invisible. But every night, I was at work. Arthur's pen was my lifeline. He'd rigged it to upload and download files whenever I plugged it into the library computer to charge. I'd record my strategic directives, my analysis of the data he sent, my knowledge of the company's hidden systems. He'd send back encrypted spreadsheets, scanned documents, and whispered reports from his network of insiders, the loyalists. Arthur was a bloodhound. He unearthed a web of deceit that was more audacious than I could have imagined. Marcus wasn't just reckless, he'd been committing systematic fraud. He had set up shell corporations in offshore tax havens, having Sterling Innovations purchase non-existent consulting services from them, effectively paying himself millions. He was also running classic pump-and-dump schemes with Sterling's stock. My mother's scam was more elegant, but just as venomous. Her foundation was a money laundering machine. Corporate donations from Sterling went in and were funneled out to pay for her extravagant lifestyle, all written off as charitable expenses. My job was to connect the dots. I knew the internal accounting codes, the project names he was using as cover, the bankers he favored. Sitting in that sterile library, I built a shadow empire of evidence. I mapped out their money laundering. I wrote a program to cross-reference their secret transactions with public stock market data, proving the insider trading. I was building a digital guillotine, piece by piece. While I did that, Arthur was making moves. He used his own funds, plus discreet investments from other loyalists, to form an anonymous investment entity. We called it Nemesis Capital. It was a shark, circling the bloated whale that Sterling Innovations had become. Our strategy was twofold. First, we started buying up Sterling's debt. Marcus, in his arrogance, had taken on massive loans. Nemesis Capital quietly bought those loans from the lenders. In a matter of months, we became one of our family's largest creditors. They had no idea they owed their survival to the woman they'd locked away. Second, we began to strategically sabotage them. When Marcus tried to acquire a smaller tech firm, I recognized the technology as flawed. I fed Arthur the exact technical questions to have an anonymous source leak to the financial press. The deal collapsed. When they tried to launch a new product, a cheap knockoff of one of my old designs, we anonymously tipped off regulators about a non-compliant component. The product was hit with a massive recall. With every stumble, Marcus and my mother got more desperate. They doubled down on their fraud, their actions getting sloppier and easier for Arthur to track. They were rats in a maze of our design, and the walls were closing in. Meanwhile, I was executing my own escape plan. After 10 months of perfect behavior, I petitioned the court for my competency hearing. I hired a sharp, hungry lawyer Arthur recommended. The hearing was a joke. My therapist testified I'd made remarkable progress. I spoke calmly about my plans for a quiet life. Marcus and my mother didn't even show up. They were so convinced I was a broken, defeated woman they saw me as zero threat. They thought they were releasing a tame pet. They had no idea they were opening the cage for their executioner. The day I walked out of that facility, I didn't head for a cottage. I went to a sleek, anonymous corporate apartment Arthur had arranged. On the table was a laptop, a dozen burner phones, and a single file folder with the Nemesis Capital logo on it. Arthur was there to greet me. "Welcome back to the world, Ghost," he said. "It's time to haunt them," I replied. The comeback was over. The reckoning was about to begin. The annual general meeting of Sterling Innovations was the event of the season, held in the grand ballroom of a 5-star hotel. For my mother, it was the pinnacle of her social calendar. For Marcus, it was his coronation, a chance to boast about another year of record growth built on lies. They had no clue the company was a house of cards, and I was about to kick out the foundation. I didn't use a ticket. I walked in through a service entrance, access granted by an old army buddy of Arthur's. I wore a simple, elegant black dress. I wanted to look like their ghost. I waited in the wings as Marcus took the stage. He was in his element, radiating confidence. He even had the audacity to mention me. "As many of you know," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "my sister, a brilliant but troubled mind, has recently been released from care. We wish her peace and quiet in her new life, and we are forever grateful for her early contributions." That was my cue. I stepped out from the shadows and walked calmly toward the stage. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones came up. I saw my mother in the front row, her face paling, her smile frozen in horror. Marcus faltered, his eyes wide as if he'd seen an apparition. "Peace and quiet were never part of the plan, Marcus," I said, my voice clear and steady, picked up by his microphone. I didn't shout. The cold fury in my voice cut through the silence. Security started to move, but Arthur, sitting in the third row, just held up a hand and shook his head. They stopped, confused. I turned to the audience. "My brother speaks of record growth. I'm here to talk about the real records. For the past year, my brother has funneled over $90 million of company funds into shell corporations he controls." Gasps echoed through the room. Marcus gripped the lectern. "This is absurd. She's unwell. Security, remove her." "Is it?" I asked, pulling a flash drive from my pocket. "On this drive, you'll find every wire transfer to the Cayman Islands and Panama. You'll find the papers for shell companies listing my brother's old college roommates as front men." I took a step closer, my eyes locked on his. "Or we could discuss the pump and dump scheme you ran with Omni Tech stock. I have the trading logs. The SEC will be very interested." Marcus was stammering, his face slick with sweat. His charm was gone, leaving only a panicked, cornered animal. I then turned my attention to my mother, who looked like she might faint. "And Mother," I said, my voice soft with mock pity, "your beautiful Sterling Hope Foundation. It's a shame a forensic accounting shows 92% of its donations went to couture, private jets, and parties. The IRS calls that tax fraud and money laundering." I let that hang in the air before delivering the final blow. "But their criminal enterprise is their problem. Your problem," I said to the room, "is that Sterling Innovations is functionally bankrupt. However, there is a solution." I gestured to Arthur, who stood up. "Allow me to introduce you to Nemesis Capital," I announced. "For the past 9 months, Nemesis has been acquiring Sterling's debt. As of this morning, we are the majority creditor of this company. We own the loans that keep these lights on, and we are exercising our right to restructure in the face of gross mismanagement and fraud." The silence was absolute. I had just detonated a nuke in their world. "As of now," I declared, "the entire board is dismissed. Marcus Sterling and his mother are removed from any association with this company. The authorities are waiting for you both outside. All of your personal assets acquired through fraud will be seized to repay the company. Sterling Innovations is under new management, my management." I walked onto the stage and stood beside my brother, who looked completely broken. I leaned in close, so only he could hear. "You declared me incompetent," I whispered. "You should have made sure it was true. You took everything, now I'm back, and I'm taking it all." I took the microphone from his limp hand and looked out at the stunned crowd. "The real work begins now. We will rebuild this company on a foundation of integrity. We will bring back the clean energy division. We will restore the legacy my father started. The Sterling name will once again stand for excellence, not for greed." The reckoning was over. The reclamation had begun. The fallout was swift and absolute. Marcus and my mother were arrested trying to flee the hotel. Their trials were a media sensation, laying bare every sordid detail of their greed. They were convicted and lost everything: their money, their homes, their freedom, and the one thing my mother valued most: their reputation. Now they're just a cautionary tale whispered at the country clubs they used to own. Rebuilding Sterling Innovations was the hardest thing I've ever done. The company was a financial and moral wreck, but with Arthur by my side as my new CFO, and with the loyalists in key leadership positions, we began the slow process of cleaning house. We paid back the debts. We rehired the talented people Marcus had fired. We relaunched the clean energy division, making it the new heart of the company. 2 years later, Sterling is more profitable and respected than ever. We built it back, stronger and cleaner. I don't run it from the shadows anymore. I'm the CEO, the face of the company, and the guardian of its soul. People ask me if the revenge was worth it. They see the empire I command and assume that was the prize. They're wrong. The prize wasn't the money or the power. The prize was taking back my name and my story. It was proving I was not the person they tried to make me. They say living well is the best revenge. I disagree. Living well is wonderful. But sometimes, a cold, calculated, and perfectly executed reckoning is a very close second. They left me for dead with nothing. They were right about one thing. I had nothing. And a person with nothing to lose is a person you should never, ever underestimate. Thank you for listening to my story. If you want to hear more tales of justice and revenge, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my position. Until next time, remember that the comeback is always greater than the setback.